All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Talkin Ball live with Pat Leonard, fresh off the NFL owners meetings in Orlando, Florida, back here in North Jersey with some news for you, the diehards who are here right out of the gate on the Talkin Ball live with Pat Leonard podcast. You ready for this one, Giants fans? So, a source tells me that the Giants are scheduled to send a contingent to Ann Arbor, Michigan this Easter Sunday for a private workout with Michigan quarterback J.J. McCarthy. Now, Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll are attending multiple pro days this week. They were at LSU for Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, the wide receiver, as well. UNC's Drake May and Michael Penix on deck at North Carolina and Washington, respectively, as we speak here on this special episode on a Wednesday night. But the Giants had Brandon Brown, Shea Tierney at the Michigan Pro Day. They, of course, have had McCarthy in for a visit into East Rutherford already. And now a source tells me that the next step is a closer look at J.J. McCarthy this coming weekend in Michigan. So we kick off with a bang here on the Talkin Ball live with Pat Leonard. Pod and Q&A. Thanks for being patient as I, boots on the ground, was working the hallways and working the corners of the Ritz and the JW Marriott down in Orlando, Florida, talking to owners, talking to general managers, talking to coaches, talking to team executives and personnel, and getting the lay of the land for what is going to happen with your New York Giants, both now and in the near future. The NFL draft, obviously a huge part of it, but also important to rewind and reflect on Brian Daboll's part in last season's dysfunction. John Mara talking to us for the first time in a calendar year, getting his thoughts on everything that's going on with his team. The last time we had talked to him, the Giants have been coming off a playoff berth and victory. This time they're coming off a 6-11 season with a lot of questions about their roster and their regime, and also talking to Joe Schoen about the direction that the Giants might go, and obviously reading the tea leaves, but also bringing the news straight to you here on the Talkin Ball live with Pat Leonard pod. I'm going to tell you guys about Bet Online and get right to the questions here on the Believe Network. The tournament is here. Bet Online is your bracket headquarters for this season with the best bracket contest out there and odds, lines, and info on every game and every round right up until the national championship. You can access the most up-to-the-minute wagering information anytime from your desktop or your mobile devices, and even track your bracket real-time all the way through the tournament. Head to Bet Online today and get in on all the action. Remember to use the promo code BELIEVE for your 50% Wonka bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, the game starts here. And we're going to start right away with Candyman hitting the super sticker for $5. Thank you, Candyman, so much. We always appreciate that. Candyman says, what do you hear about Evan Neal refusing to move to guard? Is it true? Evan said directly to us, Candyman, during the season that he was not interested in that. He was born to be a tackle. And the Giants view this situation this way. They drafted Evan Neal to be a tackle. They believe he can be a tackle. Last season and the first two seasons haven't gone well. Obviously, Evan needs to mature as an athlete and as a person, especially when it comes to dealing with the criticism in New York. Whether it's fair or not, he has to tune out the noise and just do the work. But also on the Giants end, he had an injury that was misdiagnosed in his ankle. It wasn't a sprain, it was a break. And that was really a serious issue for Evan Neal in the sense that he was never able to get back on the field for the second half of that season coming out of 2023. So, the idea that the Giants would move him without him getting 2 full years to play the position they drafted him to play, from the player's perspective, especially with the injury misdiagnosis, from the Giants' standpoint, it's okay. We're going to sign Jermaine Illuminor. We're going to have him available to compete with Evan Neal, possibly take that tackle job and win it. But we're going to give Evan that opportunity right out of the gate to play tackle, to win that job, to prove that he can play the position that we felt he could when we draft him. And so, we've talked here on this podcast. We talked to Justin Pugh, Evan Neal's teammate, who was saying that he feels like being on the left side of the line could help Evan Neal in the long run. He did play left tackle, left guard, and right tackle in college, so he proved he could play all three at Alabama. But Pugh postulating or hypothetically kind of creating this scenario because he did it too, right? Justin Pugh was somebody who ended up settling in at that left guard spot, and it helped his career and his longevity after playing tackle early on. So he had that fresh experience. So I think, Candyman, I don't think it would be shocking if Evan ended up at guard. But I think a lot of these factors, especially because of how last season ended and trying to do right by the player when certain things were not done in his favor late in the season on the team side, I think it's fair to give Evan a shot. Now, he's also got to come in and prove right now how his ankle's doing, how he's feeling physically. And there's going to be factors there. But I think Joe Schoen said it pretty clearly right out of the gate on Monday that that Illuminor could start at guard, start working at guard with Evan being a tackle and then going from there. Great question to kick us off. Jacob says, smash and like that sub button on your way in for Pat. Really appreciate you always leading us off with that, Jacob. Yeah, guys, remember, as Candyman showed you, super stickers and super chats, you can pay to have your question or comment answered first and elevated to the front of the chat. I will answer your question, address your point, whatever the case may be. I have a lot to give tonight because I'm coming off of 4 days really of being with the most important people in the NFL day in, day out, minute to minute, and working it morning, noon, and night. And so a lot coming out of that, obviously leading with the Giants' strong interest in the quarterback position and J.J. McCarthy specifically now with my news that a private workout is scheduled for the Giants to come down to Ann Arbor on Easter Sunday. And John Mara, when I spoke with John, a small group of us from the New York media met with John Mara on Monday in Orlando at the Owners Hotel. And late in the interview session, I asked Mara if he had gotten a chance to speak with J.J. McCarthy yet. And he said that he hasn't had a chance to speak with him. And then he looked at me and smiled and he said, not yet. Right. And so, listen, the Giants could go in a lot of different directions here at the top of the draft. And certainly they could want a quarterback and then not get the guy they want because of the teams above them, because of teams maybe trading over them. The Minnesota Vikings, the Denver Broncos, teams that could be poised to do something like that, the Raiders in the quarterback market. But the Giants are acting and moving like a team that intends to draft a quarterback up high. And John Mara, the combination of John Mara saying, first of all, that he approves of them drafting a quarterback at 6 if Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll deem it necessary, or trading up for one if they deem it necessary and they find the player they're looking for. He approves, he supports that, John Mara. Secondly, Mara also said that Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll and the Giants scouting staff have told him that this is the best group of quarterbacks they've seen come out in years. And so though all of these factors add up to clearly the Giants are digging in very strongly into the quarterbacks. So that's what we're talking about. All right. And I'm just going to tell everybody now, as we do this podcast here, that if they aren't on this podcast right now, they're in the wrong place, because we are dropping knowledge on the Giants tonight. Am I right? All right. So let's see. Let's get to the next question. Jacob says, all right, Pat, some questions to start the live off. Based on Tre'Davious White going to the Rams, are we going to pivot and draft another corner? Is J.J. McCarthy actually a realistic possibility at 2? And who is RB2 behind Singletary? Jacob, okay, I'll take those one at a time. But drafting a quarterback is definitely on the table. There are veterans still out there and available, Jacob, lingering on the market, but the prices need to come down for a lot of teams, not just the Giants. So I think, clearly based on, the Giants' interest in White and the Giants' continued interest in that position and their need at the corner position, they're definitely in the market. I would honestly say, Jacob, more likely you need to get some veteran blood into that corner room and some reliability opposite Deonte Banks. I would advocate you could draft one and sign one. I mean, this is a premium position in a passing league, right? The Giants have been in positions lately where they have had a couple good corners on the field, but if their slot isn't strong and if they're not if they have a weakness on the field, teams exploit it, right? They find it and exploit it. All right, so let's put this on Twitter now. Just reported on Talkin Ball Live with Pat Leonard. Source says Giants are scheduled to send a contingent to Ann Arbor, Michigan on Easter Sunday for a private workout with J.J. McCarthy. Joe Shane and Brian Daboll attending multiple pro days this week. Had LSU quarterback Jaden Daniels today, UNC's Drake May tomorrow. Brandon Brown and Shea Tierney were at McCarthy's pro day, but now comes a closer look. All right, let's throw that up on the Twitter machine, or X as we call it now, right? All right. As the questions roll in, let's get to them. All right. RB2 behind Singletary, you asked. Clearly they want to give Eric Gray a closer look there at RB2 or in the running back in the backfield. He didn't work out as a returner, so you got to try to get him to work out at running back at that position, at the number one position that he needs to provide value in, because he's not a returner. He proved that last year. One thing I thought was interesting is this new kickoff rule. Jashaun Corbin being on the Giants roster, a guy who proved, I thought, as an undrafted rookie early in his career, I thought Jashaun showed really good return ability coming out of college for the Giants. And I think that he should be a candidate to compete for the return job, because the ball's going to be coming out of the end zone or being returned more often now in the NFL. They're going to see more returns. They're encouraging more returns. So I think Corbin should have a chance to work in that backfield and also at the return position. That's what you jogged my memory there by mentioning RB2. But the Giants have still been in that running back, that veteran running back market as well. I don't think they're done with their backfield. I've mentioned that they have been looking at running backs in the draft too, and they might have some of that capital available in the middle rounds or late rounds to go get one. Do I think Jim Harbaugh made the comments to try to entice someone to trade with the Chargers at 5? Thanks for answering these questions. Thank you, Jacob. I think Harbaugh was definitely trying to tease the value of the Chargers pick. He very much sounded like someone who wants to trade back. Of course, there are picks above him that could be places where teams that are quarterback needy need to move. So, trading with the Chargers is all well and good, right? At number 5, that's a premium pick. But if the Cardinals are for sale, and that's what it looks like, right? And if the Patriots are a team that is at least listening at number 3, you can't trade it to 5, especially early on right now as an NFL team, when someone could just move up over you to 4. So I think the Chargers, if they're going to get someone to come up there, that's going to probably have to happen closer to the draft. But yeah, even Harbaugh mentioning that if 4 quarterbacks go above the Chargers, that their pick really becomes the number 1 pick for non-quarterback teams, and therefore the trade chart should be calculated accordingly. That cracked me up, but I do think his praise for J.J. McCarthy was genuine. I don't think that was just propping up the that his value just for the Chargers pick's sake. G-Men says, Pat, what's going on? What buzz did you hear regarding the Giants at the owners' meetings? G-Men, I think the view of the Giants right now is that they're a team that still has a lot of holes on their roster to fill, that they could go in a lot of different directions at the top of the draft, and you could make a strong argument for a lot of them, right? Like based on quarterback, receiver, offensive line again, whatever it is. I think a lot of people around the league view them as really absent any elite weapons on offense, especially losing Saquon, who was the guy who was putting it in the end zone. So there is a group of people in the league who just from the outside looking in, look at the Giants and they think it's obvious that they need to add a top weapon and a receiver. And that, so that's why a guy like Malik Neighbors, for example, who met with the Giants again, had dinner with the Giants this week on Tuesday night before the pro day at LSU on Wednesday. Neighbors is a candidate for the Giants if they can't get the quarterback they're looking for. Because remember, they're strong in the quarterback market, but you don't fall in love with all of them, right? So if they decide 1 or 2 of these quarterbacks stands out above the rest and they're worth that pick or moving up, but they can't get them, they do have that strong need at receiver. So that looks more like a part of the plan, depending on how the board falls. Obviously, Joe Schoen also, this is something to keep in mind, G-Men, is Joe Schoen actually talked a lot about we could move up, we could move back, we could pick. And he does keep an open mind on those things. Like, he's not BSing when Shane talks about that. He is working the phones. This isn't Dave Gettleman not answering the phone when you have the number 2 overall pick and you take a running back when teams are trying to move up for QBs. That's not Joe Schoen. And you could make an argument that depending on how the board falls, the Giants still have so many holes on their roster. And remember, Joe Schoen used that high second-round pick, a valuable pick, in that Brian Burns trade. So he only has 1 second and is back a little bit, I think, maybe 47. And so if the board falls a certain way and the Giants can't get to that QB there, can they move back slightly and still get a premium receiver and acquire a little bit more draft capital to address the holes on their roster in an affordable and efficient way? Because, and you asked me again, what other buzz I'm hearing on the Giants. Listen, G-Man, as much as Brian Daboll got the support from John Mara this week, and John Mara did say he has full confidence in Shane and Daboll. Mara also said he doesn't view Shane and Daboll necessarily as a package deal. So each of them has different jobs and could have different levels of success. So that, that kind of puts him on an island as a coach there. The reality just is that it comes down to there is a lot of pressure on Brian Daboll this season. I would expect him to call plays on offense, and have been reporting that since basically January. And the stakes are high. That's I think what it stands out the most on the Giants and with Daboll. All right, going to try to get to more questions because you guys are rolling them in here. All right, Tuto says, with a $5 super chat, my guy Tuto, always supporting the channel. Tuto says, massive salutes and respects to Big Boss Pat and all diehard Giants fans across the pond. And please slap all stinky birds losers out there and say we forget about it. And Tuto, you're one of our greatest supporters here on the pod, on the lives. And I would say John Mara said 3 different times during his answer about Saquon Barkley leaving that he either hated or disliked or didn't feel good about the fact that Barkley signed in division. And he said he didn't blame Saquon for it, but he mentioned that even when Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll were explaining how they wanted to move, how they wanted to allocate their resources, even when he was explaining that, he was saying, as it was proceeding, and as the Giants were moving towards a direction where he realized it was probably actually going to happen, Shane and Daboll were informing him that, listen, this could lead to, and then eventually this will lead to him signing with the Eagles, but we still think it's the best thing for us. And Mara said, they knew I didn't like that, but I'm trusting them. I'm paying them to make these decisions. And so that's why. So as you say, the stinky Boyds, the birds, landing Barkley, but Mara kind of echoing your sentiment there, Tuto. Jacob says, since tomorrow is opening day, do you have a fan favorite baseball team? Well, Jacob, I grew up in Philadelphia, so I grew up rooting for the Phillies, but check out what I'm wearing here. This is courtesy of spring training, Steinbrenner Field, Steinbrenner Stadium, Steinbrenner Field down in Tampa. Was down at spring training watching the Yanks for 4 games down there, supporting my guy, Anthony Volpe. Shout out to AV and to the Yankees. Hope they have a great season. Great kid. Kid's going to have another great year, is going to put it together at the plate, the Gold Glove already coming off the rookie season. So, being here as an adopted North Jerseyan and New Yorker of sorts, I know you're never going to be fully accepted coming in from Philadelphia, that's for sure. But, pulling for the Yanks now. Pulling for the Yanks and my guy, Anthony Volpe. All right, Tudo, checking back in. Big Boss Pat, Saturday, July 20th, 12 p.m. Eastern. Peacock stream, Italy versus Japan. Witness the O-line assassin in action, crushing losers and keeping the hospitals busy all day. Please pray for my victims. Everybody tune in. Tuto plays rugby. He's a rugby stud. There you go. July 20th, noon Eastern on Peacock. Tuto, please remind us of that as we get closer to that date, and we will make sure everybody on here circles that. All right, let's keep going. Tuto, thanks so much for the support too. Really appreciate it as always. Hunter says, good evening, Pat. I'm going to shoot a few questions your way at the beginning because I got to leave early. No problem, Hunter. We appreciate your support as always. A day oneer there, Hunter. All right. If you had to make a guess right now, who do we draft at 6? McCarthy really stands out to me right now, Hunter. Malik Neighbors also, if they can't get their quarterback. Those are the two guys standing out to me. Hunter also says, what do you think on possibly drafting Joe Milton later rounds in the draft, if not a quarterback at 6? I think he's a guy that I have circled, Hunter, for the Giants in the late rounds if they don't get one early, like above others, though there are other guys up back there. Hunter says, what's your opinion on the new rules, the kickoff and hip drop ban? I don't like the hip drop one at all. Yeah, the hip drop, I think it's, yes, now and then does a guy blatantly use a tactic that's really that looks dangerous, right? With a hip drop perspective, right? And they're not using the proper technique, let's say, whatever that happens here and then. And you don't want to see guys get hurt, but a lot of these defenders, like you got to bring guys down by any means necessary. And it's not even happening, I think, consciously half the time. It's just you're trying to get the guy on the ground, right? And I think, Hunter, my overall opinion, I do think something had to happen with the kickoff because special teams coaches, I mean, they were becoming, like near extinct dinosaurs. It was like eliminating a huge part of their job responsibilities, right? It was like you didn't want their side of the ball to become obsolete. And Roger Goodell, I was told, was, very upset with how the play basically was a non-play in the NFL, and they needed to see it revived. But the combination of the new, and you guys can read this story on the Daily News website at some point as well. I did a story on it the other day. The NFL is projecting that the average field position start for offenses now with this new rule is going to move from around the 25 to around the 29. So you're increasing field position start for the offense on average, and you're also banning the hip drop tackle, which is another advantage for the offense and takes something away from the defense. So those things combined, Hunter, I think my overall opinion and view of it is this is going to help offenses in both ways. Hunter also says, I saw Rome Odunze not working out at Washington Pro Day. Were the Giants going to go watch him at his Pro Day? Hunter, I do think that the Drake May UNC Pro Day makes more sense for the Giants because they're going to have people at both of these. So the Giants will have people at both of those pro days, but because you have Penix in Washington, they've also spent time with Penix already. But I think Odunze is a guy, he's already visited the Giants. And just like with McCarthy here, they've seen him and had him visit in certain ways already. But then if they need to get in front of Odunze more, they'll do it, right? Like if they want a private workout and more extensive workout than what they've had already, they'll go get it because of this schedule. Like that's actually what Joe Shane was talking about. Joe Shane said that, part of the process, and even when we were asking him about, are you going to trade up? Who's going to trade up? Are the Vikings going to trade up? And he was pointing out this idea that, this process is difficult to get completed this early because of all the pro day schedules. You're having people visit your building. You're going out to see them play at their schools, at their pro days. Some pro days overlap, like Washington and UNC being on the same day. So, they'll get in. They'll get it in one way or another. Don't worry. Charlie, thank you so much. Charlie says, any chance with a $5 sticker? He says, any chance Brock Bowers at 6? Charlie, that's an interesting question. With Waller likely retiring, I would say. We don't know, but with it seeming like it's heading that direction, I think that obviously that makes Bowers stand out a little bit more. And it feels like, okay, it's not just like you're taking the tight end over the receiver. You're taking a premium weapon in the middle of the field who can help you downfield as well. And also the hip drop's been banned now. So good luck to all the corners or safeties trying to bring Brock Bowers down as he's rumbling down the field, right, on these catch and runs. I can't sit here and tell you that's not going to happen, But Charlie, I would just say this like flat out. I mean, the Giants are acting like a team that's trying to go get a quarterback. They're talking like it. They're acting like it. They're putting in the time. And I always say this about Joe Schoen. So far, Joe Schoen's actions and visits and the time he spends in scouting lines up with, like, over the last few years, it lines up with where he spends his time and resources is where he spends his picks, right? Like that, I'm not saying that you can telegraph everything he's going to do, but what I'm saying is that he does very diligent and meaningful and targeted work on the guys he ends up picking. And so I always say I like Joe Schoen's process. And so right now, listen, Joe Schoen was this was actually very interesting to me. I want to read you guys this quote because I thought this was something that was worth sharing. So I had reported on here that the Giants, I had heard, were not thrilled that it got out that that they prefer JJ McCarthy and that everybody thinks they're going quarterback. Connor Hughes had reported that. Connor does great work over at SNY. And I viewed hearing the fact that it upset them that it got out, it's almost like confirmation, like, yeah, like, listen, people know that we're looking into this kid, but we don't want it out there that he's our preference, right? We don't want people trading over us because we know they like him too. A lot of people think the Vikings like him, right? All those things. But Joe Schoen actually reacted in his interview with us at the NFL owners meetings. He said, so he's talking about, the question was, how aware are you that if you have a bunch of teams in the top 13, there's always speculation about who can move up, who's interested in the same guys. How aware are you with that process? Do you let it factor in? Do teams put out smoke? Right? Just asking him about that process of navigating it. And he said, yeah, the good thing is it's a relationship business. If you have a good relationship with GMs and you've had conversations with them, you keep open lines of communication. Then he says, some of the noise that's out there, I don't even know where some of it comes from. It's just a lot of it is not true. I'm not one to play a lot of games and leak stuff and do all that stuff. So I think that kind of happens on its own for whatever reason. I think the most important part in this position is having good relationships with GMs and open lines of communication. That's what matters. It's not what's out there or the narrative or what the rumors are. If you are having conversations with other GMs, I think those relationships will come through and there will be truth in those conversations. So I thought that was very interesting because I viewed that as, it was also Schoen now sounding like he wasn't thrilled with the fact that there are all these rumors floating around that people are saying they know what they're going to do. And he's kind of pushing back on the idea that any of this is valid. So I said to Schoen, Joe, what noise are you referring to that's wildly inaccurate about the top of the draft there? Because it sounded to me like he was talking about something specific, or I didn't know if he was talking about several reports, right? So he said, anything that's out there, there are very few people that know what we're thinking or what direction we're going. Anything that is out there is likely not true. So, it's hard to believe that everything that's out there is not true. But is that Joe Schoen and the Giants being sensitive to the fact that too much is getting out or too much is being discussed or telegraphed? I think that's Joe Schoen also saying, though, that, listen, we're doing a lot of work here. And yes, we're spending time on guys we're interested in, but it's impossible for everybody to know all the permutations. Still, I do believe that it's pretty clear that they are acting like a team that is very strongly in the quarterback market. But again, it comes back to, you win a couple games down the stretch of a meaningless season and you win yourself out of the top two, the top three, right? Now they have the 6th pick. They were in position to possibly go get Caleb Williams if it finished a certain way, to have the number 2 pick and have their pick of the litter after Caleb Williams if it ended a certain way. But they chose to ride it out. Even John Mara said, and Joe Schoen confirmed, they didn't trade Saquon Barkley at the deadline because they were still trying to win. They were 2-6 at the deadline, and they chose to stick with Saquon because Jones was coming back off the neck injury. They wanted to give him enough to get going and rolling at midseason. Obviously, they only finished 4-5. They finished 6-11, and that didn't work out, right? But but John Mara and Joe Schoen both saying they were trying to win there. And Mara even said that at that moment, he said that at that moment, Mara also still was hopeful they were going to re-sign Barkley. So, you know, he doesn't like the idea of trading players at the deadline as well, because he thinks it signals that you're giving up on the year. But obviously the Giants did trade Leonard Williams at the deadline, and they got a second and a fifth out of it, right? And then because they had a second from the Seahawks, they flipped their own second to the Carolina Panthers to help get Brian Burns, right? So, but see, I said this right at the time that happened too. With how bad it was internally with the Giants and how bad the season was going, especially offensively, if they traded Barkley, the wheels could have come off. And like Saquon really helped Brian Daboll a ton by staying on through the end of the year and by essentially playing ball and being the leader that he was down the stretch, because he easily could have thrown in the towel and he didn't. And that's part of the reason the Giants kept him around, but obviously not productive to get nothing for him. All right, John, thank you for the $5 super chat. He says, why is Joe Schoen giving Waller so much time to make up his mind? How much salary is Waller holding the Giants hostage for? He's been a Giants for one season. Well, John, Darren Waller obviously is a guy who has battled a lot in his life, overcome a lot to have the career that he has had. He is a well-respected, young man, and also a well-respected player. He is a tenured veteran in the league, a guy who has earned the respect to make whatever decision he feels is best for him. His cap number for this season at the moment is $14 million. The dead money, if you were to cut him at this moment, the dead money would be $7.3 million for this year. You would save 6.7 on the cap just by cutting the player. So that's the kind of the breakdown there. And I think it has to happen sooner than later, though. Like I really do think, I think Jordan from ESPN, Jordan Rana was the one who asked Shane, like, well, how do you plan around not knowing whether the guy's going to play? It's so late, right? Like the draft is coming up. But that's why I think, that's why I think that more than likely he's not going to play. But the Giants obviously have to operate like he's not going to, right? So, all right, let's see. Let's get back into the queue. Thank you for all the super chats and super stickers. Remember, guys, if you don't already subscribe, it's PL on NFL on YouTube. If you want to get a question or comment addressed or answered first, you can purchase a super sticker or a super chat, as Candyman and Tuto and all of these guys have. All of these extremely supportive fans and listeners and viewers. Who was I missing? Charlie dropped one in. John dropped one in. Really appreciate you guys. I'm going to get to all your questions. If you don't purchase a super chat or super sticker, please just hit the thumbs up, hit the like button underneath this video as we go. That live engagement and those likes while we are live, they count double, triple, exponentially. They help YouTube understand how many people are here, how much we are doing here, and how much it's worth it for more Giants fans to come on board and join us. Remember, I am at PL on NFL. That's my handle. Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and YouTube. And on X, I'm P Leonard NYDN. I'm the New York Daily News NFL columnist and Giants beat writer. And we are here rolling on the Talkin Ball live with Pat Leonard pod. We do these typically Mondays and Thursdays at 9 p.m. It's just been a little bit different of a schedule this last couple of weeks, with me taking a few days to go down to spring training, and then also being at the NFL owners meetings, where, frankly, guys, I kept trying to squeeze in a live chat right after some of those interviews, but there's just so much information to gather and so many people to talk to right at your fingertips that it was better and more productive for me and for you guys for me to gather it all, work it all, and then come back and then we talk here. Daddy. Let's see. We got back in. Jacob said any Giants might have a starting grade on Pratt, Rattler, Milton. Yeah, I think Milton profiles with the size and the traits. Dad Hat says, if we stay put, Minnesota. Oh, Malik Neighbors. Okay, Malik Neighbors. Yeah, you like Malik Neighbors at 6 if the Giants stay put. I got it. Rich S says, Talking Ball live. Let's go. That's right, Rich. You know it. All right. Luann says, hey, Pat. Hey, Luann, always the eternal optimist of this group. Jake says, did Shane talk at all about how the Burns trade came together? No, my understanding, though, like he and Morgan, Dan Morgan, the Carolina Panthers GM, are super close. And they completed that deal that over text, really, as far as like kind of getting it moving and, kind of closing the deal there. They spent time together at the NFL Combine as well. They're close friends. And so, but yeah, over text message is what I was told is how that came together in the end. One thing that was a little bit odd was Shane was asked about Brian Burns, about the trade and the contract. And he was asked the question. The question was, let me find it. So Joe Shane was asked, we haven't talked to you since the Brian Burns trade and contract. You made a huge investment in him money-wise, and then the trade with the 39th pick. Do you view Burns as one of the best edge rushers in the league? Because that's kind of what he is paid as. Shane did not say yes. He said, I view him as a good young player that we're looking forward to getting in. He's been in the building for one day, so we're looking forward to him coming in the offseason program, working hard and doing the best he can to help our defense and win us some more games. Now, I understand why the Giants, they don't want to put another guy on a pedestal over another. They don't want to anoint a guy who hasn't played it down for the team yet, hasn't had a practice for the team yet. I get that. But you just gave this guy a 5-year, $141 million contract. He is now the second highest paid edge rusher in the league behind Nick Bosa. So it just, it sounds a little odd when you're giving a guy $28.2 million a year on average, which is only trailing Nick Bosa's $34 million among edge rushers. But then when asked if you think he's one of the best edge rushers in the league, you don't answer yes. I don't know. It's a little odd, but I think it has more to do with how they want to talk about players and run their building more than anything else. But obviously you think he is if you're paying him that money, right? Luann says, I want a wide receiver, not JJ McCarthy. We know you believe in DJ, Luann. That's why. Bill Hartnett says, just in time, Pat. Finished my last video. All right, Bill. George says, good night, Pat. We met at the NFL owners meetings. George, I'm starring that comment. What's going on? So George is a loyal listener and follower down in Florida. And this is one thing that really excites me. I'm walking through the hallway in the NFL owners meetings, and I haven't met George yet, but he says, hi, Pat. I had a badge around my neck, so it had my name on it, right? So I figured, that gentleman, saw my name. He's being friendly. I said hello, kept walking to wherever I was going, whatever meeting I was going to or interview I was going to. Later that same day, I'm walking down a different hallway, and I see George again. And he says, are you talking ball tonight? And I looked at him. I said, you're a loyal listener? And George says, that's right. And that made me, George, I got to be honest, like that made me feel, that was so cool because it is so great to see that what we're doing here is resonating with you, the real Giant fan, the real people. And I'm super grateful. Like I'm super grateful that you participate, that you join, and that we can talk ball like this. We can talk Giants like this. But it's, we're always right through the looking glass on these videos on YouTube, on Spotify or Apple, if you're listening to this on audio. And so running into you in real life and talking ball like that, and you articulating your appreciation, but really the appreciation is all on this side, George. And thanks for saying hello and for saying that, because even when I was with another reporter and George, and they said, how do you know him? And I said, I don't. He literally we know each other through the podcast, right? We don't know each other personally yet, but we know each other through the Talkin Ball Live. And so this is helping people. This is helping us connect. I really appreciate it. John with a $5 super chat as well says, if John Mara is okay with drafting a quarterback, Does that mean extension for Shane and Daboll? I'm tired of seeing a restart every 3 years, no continuity. John, Mara was asked that question specifically about whether it would help Daboll buy some time, because it's the idea that, okay, you draft Daniel Jones, but he ends up having several different coaches and no continuity at the start. So if you draft a quarterback, does that mean that Brian Daboll buys some time? He was asked a version of that question because you want that quarterback to have continuity. And Mara essentially said that he does not view those things as definitely linked. So could it, if they hit on the quarterback, right? And if they win games and Daboll improves as a coach, then yes, absolutely. But not necessarily. And Mara certainly said that that's not definitely the case. Jonathan says, are the Giants done with signing free agents? I really hope we target a CB before the draft. I still think they're looking at, a veteran corner, a veteran running back. There's still players out there, but the prices need to come down. They're starting to come down, but they need to come down for a team like the Giants. Jake says, was that Saleh Woody Johnson altercation legit? Jake, I saw that. I think it was discussed on an NFL media podcast that allegedly there was an altercation or a heated conversation between Woody Johnson and Robert Saleh. No, I didn't see it. I actually, I have to be honest, I hadn't even heard that. It sounded like it was a report of something that was heard second or seen by someone else. So it was like a secondhand information. I'm not going to go anywhere near that. And, like from my vantage point, that's not a thing that I had heard. So, I can't give any life to that. I'm not going to. Jake says, what is more likely, a trade up or a trade down? Jake, I'm sitting here right now. I think being at six and drafting a receiver or trading back are both on the table, right? If they can't get their QB, I think a trade up's on the table. Now, where are you trading to? Probably 4 with the Cardinals, right? If you're trading up, because I still don't buy that the Patriots aren't taking a quarterback or are going to trade out or anything like that. I mean, maybe they will. I'll believe it when I see it. But I guess I don't know. My best guess right now is like trade up at 4 to get JJ, or sit at 6, get Neighbors, or trade back. You still get a guy like maybe Thomas, the other LSU wide receiver, get more assets. Those are some things that I guess could be in play. Luann says Daniel Jones just needs 2 big playmakers. He does need playmakers. The Giants need playmakers. Jacob says, Pat, private workouts indicate real interest, especially for quarterbacks, right? For example, they had privates with Josh Allen before they drafted him. Correct. George says, what do you hear about the Giants with CB2? I haven't heard anything. I haven't heard about any specific player other than there was Tre'Davious White, obviously. He was a candidate. He was a player that they were interested in. He was, stopping by. But obviously he ends up landing with the Rams, right? Looking at the projected or the remaining free agents, right? You have Stephon Gilmore from Dallas is still out there. Who else do we have? Xavier Howard's still out there. I don't think he's signed anywhere. Christian Fulton, the guy who struggled, was a Tennessee Titan, so this staff knows him, but has had some struggles. I definitely think there's some value out there to be had. I'm looking at a list that's a few days old. Some of those guys might have. No, I don't think Fulton signed anywhere. Gilmore really right now is the guy that if you're looking at the remaining free agents stands out to you. But if I'm Stephon Gilmore, I'm trying to sign with a winner. That's up to the player though, right? Those are the kind of scenarios where, he might welcome playing in New York if they're going to give him real money. The problem is the Giants don't have a lot of money right now. So George, sorry, I don't have a specific corner name for you at the moment. Hunter says Evan Neal was born to be a draft bust. I'm sick of him. Either do what it takes to help the team or don't let the door hit you on the way out. Hunter, I understand that sentiment, that do what it takes to help the team. And frankly, Hunter, I think that's where it will settle in. I think it will settle in. It has to be merit-based. So like I said, the injury misdiagnosis is a real thing. That's not doing right by the player with that, right? So that's a real thing. But if Evan Neal doesn't prove that he deserves that position at right tackle, he won't get it, right? Because they can't afford it. Jake says, what types of free agents are the Giants talking to in the second phase of free agency? CB2, running back 2. You know, I apologize. I don't have like specific names on the tip of my tongue of the remaining free agents. And as I articulated just now, Joe Shane saying that nobody in our building talks. We're not letting anything out. Stuff you hear is wrong. So that there is a real effort on their side, on their end, on Joe Shane's end, to keep a lot of these things close to the vest. So that's why a lot of times, like we'll be doing these, I won't necessarily know all the time the specific player at a position that the Giants are angling for. But then maybe a day later, I find out, others find out, someone in the national media reports that a certain player is now scheduled to visit 3 teams and the Giants are one of them, right? Maybe that comes from the agent, let's say. So sometimes I get to that stuff first, sometimes I don't. But obviously the Giants are kind of working to keep those things close to the vest, especially when it's a guy that they're really prioritizing. Bill says, why does the Giants medical staff misdiagnose an injury thing sound familiar? Well, Bill, it's also like some of the issues, not just misdiagnosis, it's also like last year. It sounds familiar because they have too many guys hurt every year almost, and they need to change processes about how this works with the athletic training staff, and especially with how they return guys to play. It's a combination of, from my vantage point, especially in the last 2 years under this regime, they don't practice hard enough, and the guys' bodies, and they just weren't ready to play football going into week 1 against the Dallas Cowboys and going into the season. And then secondly, there are players like Andrew Thomas coming back too early and re-aggravating something. Evan Neal coming back onto the field when the injury is something different than what they thought. Daniel Jones going back on the field after he hurts his knee and then going down and tearing his ACL. Did he tear it on the first play? Did he tear it partially on the first play, fully on the second play? Who knows? But those decisions, it does sound familiar, right? It is a problem. Hunter says, I hope Illuminor beats Evan Neal out in camp. Okay. Chronicles says, hey, Pat, what do you hear about the Giants' CB2 position? Looks like a huge question. And what do you hear around the league on the Burns deal? Need playmakers. Burns is viewed as a good player who could blossom into a great player. He hasn't done that yet, but also was on a bad team that was often playing from behind. So any pass rusher who doesn't face passing downs a lot because the opposing team is leading and running the ball more, that really can eat into production. People like his motor, his ability to stop the run, the fact that he will play from the start of the first quarter to the end of the fourth. I do think there's a little interest in the fact that after the Giants invested so much in the number 5 overall pick in Kayvon Thibodeau, that they then felt like they had to go and spend this much money and these resources on a player at the same position. I know he's opposite Kayvon Thibodeau, but usually you support an elite player, an elite investment you get, rather than maybe in this scenario, they like some of what Kayvon's done, but are they paying Brian Burns not only to complement him on the line, but also because they felt like they needed to pay somebody over Kayvon to be the elite edge rusher while Kayvon provides things in spurts? That's something I think that's worth monitoring. It's Boss Time says, any word on a trade up to 3, Pat? Not specifically yet. It's Boss Time, but I'll tell you this. Everybody is looking at the Giants right now as a team who could be aggressive and come up and get a quarterback. And J.J. McCarthy, as I said, is standing out. If you just are joining us right now, I reported at the top of the show that the Giants are scheduled to send a contingent to Ann Arbor, Michigan on Easter Sunday for a private workout with J.J. McCarthy, Michigan's quarterback, that Joe Shane and Brian Dable are attending multiple pro days this week. Obviously, LSU's Jaden Daniels was today. Drake May's tomorrow at North Carolina. But they had Brandon Brown, the assistant GM, and Shea Tierney at McCarthy's pro day. What was that, last week? And now here comes a closer look. All right. So Christian says, Pat, is a trade down scenario realistic? If so, what's the likeliest path to a trade down scenario for the Giants? Let me get that question up on the board so people can see that. And let's take a look at the draft board, Christian. So a trade down scenario for the Giants could look like a ton of quarterbacks go in the first four, let's say. So let's say the Minnesota Vikings, who already acquired the 23rd overall pick and also own pick 11, they're a team that people think could really load up and move up. So if the Vikings move up to 4 with the Cardinals, let's say, and maybe Chicago, Washington, New England, and Minnesota go 1 through 4 quarterback. Now the Chargers and the Giants at 5 and 6 are sitting in a position where they are looking at the top position players on the board. So Marvin Harrison Jr. is still on the board, Malik Neighbors still on the board, Roma Dunze on the board, Joe Alt on the board, right? So now the Giants, you don't want to trade at that moment too far out of the cluster of players that you love there, right? But who are you going to deal with? Denver, Vegas are 12 and 13. Are they coming up? Is that too far to go back, though, right? On the one hand, you don't want to move back out of your premium players. On the other hand, if a team's coming up that far, let's say from 13 to 6, right? If the Raiders want to come up for a quarterback at 6, but the Giants' favorite quarterback, let's just hypothetically say it's J.J. McCarthy, is gone, now you can acquire some significant assets to kind of reinforce your roster there. I'm looking, Tennessee's at 7, Giants are at 6. You could look for a way. The Giants obviously have a lot of connections to Tennessee. If Tennessee coveted a certain player, you could even just maybe do a flip-flop there and try to recover some assets if Tennessee's charging up for a certain player that Atlanta, Chicago, the Jets, or Denver or Vegas or New Orleans there is also looking for. So that's part of why Joe Schoen will not only be judging the players he's looking for at the top of the draft and trade up scenarios and what he can do at 6, it's also gauging what you feel these teams behind you are coming up to look for and get. Because if you can pit them against each other, you might be able to slide down the board 1 or 2 picks because this team's coming up to get a certain player. They want to beat out this other team for this edge rusher or that offensive tackle or that receiver, and then you can still get your guy 1 or 2 picks back. So that's part of the Joe Schoen information gathering process, is knowing those things so you're poised and ready. Hunter says, any idea if Adoree Jackson could come back? I don't think so. I've said here before, I don't think that's in the cards. Dad Hat Daddy checks in with a $5 super chat. Thanks, Dad Hat. He says, Lafroig single malt tonight, Pat. What's up with this? Quiet. Never heard from as of yet. Oh, single malt tonight, Pat. What's up with this quiet, never heard from as of yet defensive coordinator Shane Bowen? I do think we'll be talking to Shane Bowen in mid-April, I believe. So looking forward to that. I remember the Giants when Jason Garrett got hired. I don't think we talked to him from when he got hired in January as offensive coordinator until I think the first interview he did was in late July at the start of training camp or like in mid-August or something like that. So this is something that the Giants have done before. It's annoying, but we are going to get to talk to Shane Bowen. Obviously, the Giants are definitely working hard to move out of all of the dysfunction that created the opening that Bowen filled after a long, extensive, drawn-out search where multiple candidates were choosing other places rather than coming to the Giants. So I think it's probably a move by them to try to distance themselves a little bit time-wise from that as well before Bowen talks about it. Anthony Imperati with $5 super sticker, a super chat. Thank you, Anthony. Really appreciate that. He says, do you believe a trade to 4 for the Giants would happen prior to the draft to solidify no one else jumping over them or likely happen on draft night? Anthony, yes. I think if the Giants trade up, 4 is the place, just as we sit here right now. I also kind of confirmed with Joe Schoen, and I'll tell you what his answer was here. Joe Schoen has mentioned multiple times that when he was in Buffalo, when they were at Josh Allen's working him out private workout with the Bills, so they were still doing their process of deciding who are we evaluating? What do we think of these guys? We're trying to get around them more, right? So the Giants were still doing, or the Bills were still doing that. And this is the year 2018 that the Jets made the trade up to 3, where they eventually took Sam Darnold. And the Jets made that trade, I think, a week before the owners' meetings in March. And Shane has referenced before that was pretty early, because his recollection was you're not done the process by then. And so this year, as you can see, based on my report of the McCarthy private workout coming up, how late some of these pro days of all these top quarterbacks are, right? Like, I asked Shane, are you still of that mindset that you want to get all the hay in the barn and get closer to the draft in your scouting process before you take action? And he said, yeah, that's a good question. If you're going to go up for the position, the quarterback position in particular, you need to be around them. You're dealing with outside factors in terms of when you can get kids around the kids, when their schedules are, and they're all over the place. He said, I think a lot of the teams are going through, especially in the top 3, a process of getting around the kids. LSU hadn't had a pro day, Washington, North Carolina. So he said, it was unique when Carolina Panthers traded out at number 1 early, and the Jets did it fairly early in his mind around the same time in 2018. But he said the timing of the action this year, this is Joe Shane, I think the timing of the action, if anything, is going to happen up there. It will start probably over the next couple of weeks, but I think closer to the draft. That's probably when something will definitely happen if those teams are going to move. So Joe Shane saying that he did say he does think all those teams are listening at the top of the draft, whether or not they're actually going to move. Different teams have obviously said different things up there about whether they're willing to move, whether they're willing to listen. But Joe Shane said no one has slammed the door shut on taking the calls. And funny enough, he said he actually referenced again. Joe Shane referenced again. He's like, yeah, it's like with Kadarius Toney. Someone calls you about a player like that, you pick up the phone, you talk about it. Doesn't mean you're shopping him. So, still talking about that, even though he obviously traded him. And when I reported that there have been talks about a Kadarius Toney trade in the spring, it ends up culminating exactly with the Giants trading him to the Chiefs. But so funny. I actually chuckled out loud there. So, Joe, if you're listening, I appreciated that. I like the back and forth. All right. So let's see. Let's get to the next question. All right. Jake says, Pat, do you think Saquon handled his exit the right way? Seems like he could have had a better goodbye to the Giants and the fans. Jake, I didn't mind it, but Saquon did come clean a few days later and said he felt like he could have handled it better. And then I thought he put out a very classy statement saying, thanking the Mara family, the Tisch family, the Giants, etc. So I think he did right by them. I don't personally think he owed anything other than just thanking the fans and the Giants in general. But I think that emotions got the best of him, especially when Tiki said what he did on the radio. That really got under Saquon's skin. And personally, I think as much as Saquon didn't mind, right, going to the Eagles and signing that deal with them and staying in division because he did it, I think he was feeling a lot by doing it, right? It was still strange, right? You're joining the Philadelphia Eagles from the New York Giants. You hate the Eagles, right? They're your mortal enemy, or you're playing for the Giants. So I think it was a little weird for him too. So then catching all the flack he got on social media, Tiki riling up some fans, that kind of thing, I think that became a lot for him. So in the moment, he kind of lashed out a little. But I think he was honest about the fact that he needed to be better about it, and he did. And then as I wrote in the Daily News, I thought the Giants were a little too quiet about it for a long time, like not acknowledging it at all. That was strange. But, they said all the right things about Saquon's departure. John Mara did. Joe Shane did. John Mara definitely said, he wanted to keep him. He had to break it to his grandkids who all have Barkley jerseys, which was tough. He said he didn't want it to happen this way, but he's trusting Shane and Daboll. He said, we don't know if it's going to work out. We'll see. The only thing I thought that Mara said that didn't add up is at one point he said, you hate losing good players and people like Barkley and Xavier McKinney. And he said, unfortunately, it's, there's just guys like Eli Manning and Michael Strahan. It's just, they're rare, they don't come around all the time, essentially. Now, I understand what he's saying, but it's like, first of all, yes, in fairness, like the Giants didn't win enough when Saquon and Xavier McKinney were here, right? So part of the reason they're not here anymore. But also, you determined that you were okay with letting Saquon walk out the door, and you weren't going to spend the resources you knew that was going to keep him here in New York. And so you also decided to let him go. So to say, oh, that he's not an Eli Manning or Michael Strahan, right? I mean, yeah, obviously not, right? Not by accomplishments, not by a lot of different measures, but also like those guys remaining giants in, the once a giant, only a giant for Eli Manning. That was my line, by the way, Eli. Thanks for taking it from my Daily News article and using it in your speech. That has to cut both ways. Candyman says, Pat, do you happen to know what Jaden Daniels weighed in at? His weight had been a concern. Yes, I heard it was, hold on. I had heard it was 210? I don't want to say something that's wrong. Yeah, he weighed in at 210. Right. That's what I had heard earlier. Okay. 210 pounds. Chronicle says, Pat, you must have sources close to JJ because you always break the JJ news. Last week, it was that the Giants weren't happy it got out. He had a visit in New Jersey. Now this. Keep dropping the bombs, Pat. Chronicles, you got it, man. Hey, this is where we got to be. This is where you got to be. Chronicle says, you even beat the national insiders to this one. Appreciate you. The Crunch Bunch says, I could see the Giants drafting McCarthy if he falls to 6, but do you think they love him enough to trade a ton of draft capital for him? Seems more and more likely they will stick and pick Neighbors. That's possible. I saw Matt Miller, who's very good, pick Neighbors for them in his 7-round mock. Matt knows a lot. He knows the league very well. Crunch, I think this is a question I've posed here before too. If you're the Giants, one thing you got to be careful of in a trade up is now that you don't have that extra third or extra second because you used in the Burns deal, you don't want to use next year's first round pick, right? Like next year's first round pick could end up being a top 3 pick. And I'm not saying that to rile you guys up. I'm just saying the early season win over unders just came out the other day, and the Giants are at 6.5, right? And so like they're not, it's going to be hard for them to win a ton of games this year. So that means if you're making a trade up and it's going to be expensive and somebody wants your 1 next year, it's really different trading like the 17th overall pick in next year's draft. But if you're going to have the 3rd overall pick or the 5th, like that's a very different, right? Got to be careful. Go ask the Carolina Panthers what that feels like. Yes, I do think that they could trade up for a quarterback, though. It's just gonna depend on, like let's say McCarthy's their guy, right? Like let's say he's their only guy that they're in love with for that kind of move. If, like as Tom Pelissero reported, that a lot of people in the league think that Adam Peters in Washington like JJ at 2, right? If that's the case, and they can't go and get that guy, and Washington's certainly not trading out, especially with the Giants. Now you're saying the answer to your question becomes different, right? It's like, well, they're not just going to trade out for any QB. Here's the one they want, and they can't get him. So I think they want to go get their guy if their guy is attainable. I just don't know if they'll be able to do it. Giant Take says exactly what I've been saying. These teams aren't going to love 4 QBs. Thanks for a realistic take. Thank you. Chronicle says, huge question, Pat. Do Wink Martindale and the Giants reunite in Ann Arbor? That'll be fascinating. We need a picture of JJ McCarthy throwing at the private workout. You got Dable in the back and Shane in the back watching, arms crossed, and then you have like Wink Martindale in the background, like on a ladder or up on some kind of ledge, watching from a distance with the sunglasses and the white sleeves. By the way, Wink Martindale joined Twitter tonight. Did you guys see this? Wink Martindale on Twitter. I swear it. Let me see. His handle was, I saw somebody push it out there. I think Mike Lombardi tweeted out that he's on Twitter at Coach Wink UM. Just joined Twitter, I think. Looks like today. His first post is like, when was his first post? Like 8 hours ago, something like that. He always has 7,000 followers. So I have 42,000. So Martindale could end up passing me by the time the night's over. Chronicle says, that's in the past. The future is too far away. Thing Dable said was BS. Dable knows how to work media. Ducking the media by doing a presser before Wink firing was crazy. Now this answer. Hey, Chronicles, you're on it. Jacob says, if his job is legit in question, then they have to draft a quarterback. Don't you think they can't fire Dable when he hasn't had the ability to get his quarterback? Well, if you either prove you're a good coach or you're not as well, so that's one factor. But yeah, from my vantage point, if I'm Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, if I don't get my quarterback now, it's possibly I never do. Intel says just draft J.J. McCarthy. George says, at the owners meeting, I saw the Giants GM talking to the Chargers GM, and I heard Joe Schoen telling the Chargers GM, let's make a deal. But the Chargers GM said, yeah, I will look at it and let you know. Wow. George. So George is the guy we were talking earlier. I saw George in Florida at the owners meetings. And this is what George is telling. I'm just reading this right now. I didn't know this. So George is telling me right now, and he's telling you right now, these Talkin Ball lives, man, we're popping right now. George is bringing it. So George is saying that the Giants, Joe Schoen at 6, and the Chargers, Joe Ortiz at 5, were talking, and that Schoen said, let's make a deal to Ortiz, and Ortiz said, I'll look at it and I'll let you know. So if George is on the money with that, that could be a flip between 6 and 5, right? Who knows? George, keep bringing it, man. Really appreciate you. Hey, Antonio, what's going on? Chronicle says, you know Anthony Volpe personally? Yes. Great person, great player, hard worker. Every Yankee fan should have a number 11 jersey. And yes, this is brand new from the shop down in Florida at Steinbrenner Field. My new favorite piece of Yankees gear. I'm going to skip any questions about corner just because we've talked about it already. No offense. I don't know a specific corner, though, at the moment, but they're in the market. Intel says drafting a wide receiver will not save Daboll's job. He needs to pick his quarterback in this year's draft. Tuto being the social butterfly he always is. G-Men says, great report, Pat, about the private workout with DJ or JJ. Do you think we see a Daboll Wink fist fight on campus at Michigan? Oh, G-Men, you're killing me. I don't know. I mean, on Easter Sunday, all-out brawl on Ann Arbor's campus. Oh, geez. That'll take me back to my college days when I was a Notre Dame student walking around the big house. Antonio says, are the Giants interested in bringing back Isaiah Simmons? Antonio, I haven't heard anything on them trying to bring him back. I think he was a better fit for what Wink was doing and how he used him. But, yeah, I haven't heard anything there. Jay Stug says, hey, Pat, do you think the Vikings will jump the Giants and move up to 4 or 5? Do you have a feel for the rumors? The Vikings are, just like I told you that the Giants are a team that's very strongly in the quarterback market, and I'm telling you they're interested in McCarthy. The Vikings are another team where it's like everybody knows they're in the quarterback market and that the Vikings want a quarterback and that they could get aggressive to go get their guy. The Broncos, like Sean Payton has worked out J.J. McCarthy privately. The Broncos have worked him out as well. So that's something else I can tell you. The Broncos have worked out JJ, so Peyton is on the hunt, right? The Denver Broncos. So those are teams to watch for sure. That's why I think if the Giants, they have to get a read on what the teams at 1 through 3 are doing, right, before they make that trade. That's why a trade could really happen late. But you also have to protect your turf as well. It's tough. Winning those games hurt them, man. Joe says, hey, Pat, do you think the Giants trade up for a quarterback following Mara's they have my blessings comments? Everything points to a quarterback right now. It's just a question of whether they can get him. But yes, for sure. And if you guys didn't see, John Mara said flat out that even though he believes in Daniel Jones, Mara said full on, Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, if they want to draft a quarterback, if they want to trade up for a quarterback, I'm good with it. Let's go. He said, what's the harm in bringing him in and competing with Daniel Jones? May the best man win, right? He also said that Daboll and Shane have told him it's the best group they've seen in years. So it all points to a quarterback and a possible trade up if they can. Antonio says, anything you're hearing on the Giants' interest in free agency at safety? What do you think their plan is at second defensive tackle spot next to Dexter? I think they need to keep drafting on the interior defensive line. I don't think their depth and youth there is encouraging. Dex is obviously a high level player, but I think they need to keep stacking there. There's not a position they couldn't address in the draft, really. And what am I hearing at safety? Nothing loud yet. Definitely a position where you need more depth, though. Tudo says, Big Boss Pat, Saquon who? He left and emptied his locker, and that's all that matters. Someone else will fill the locker very quickly. But will they get in the end zone, right? Will they force opposing defenses to plan for them? That's the question. Hunter says, thank you, Pat. Have a great night. Waller needs to make up his mind. Intel says Jones is done. We will see. The Giants kind of hedged on what his readiness is going to look like for the season. Shane did say that Locke is here to be the backup, but they're kind of, encouraged that Daniel Jones is running on land, but kind of keeping the door open. Like, let's see, right? It's like that expectation of what's going to happen, not this is definitely going to happen, right? Let's see. Do you think if the Giants were definitely going QB, they would have added more weapons in free agency? Jake says. I do think, Jake, and that, like I said at the top, one of the things I was hearing at the owners' meetings from a lot of people is just, yes, they're in the quarterback market, but how can they look at their depth chart and not feel like they need to add a receiver at the top? Now, that said, this is a strong receiver draft. So like Joe Shane has said, he feels like it's a deep quarterback draft. It's also a pretty solid receiver draft. So you could get a player at 47 at receiver if you go quarterback at 6, assuming you're not using 47, obviously, if you're trading up too, though. Bill says someone compared Bowers to Shockey, and now I want him on the team so bad. Giant Take says, serious question. You ever think your job as a reporter has negative impacts on the Giants, even if you're doing your job and reporting what you hear? Giant Takes, I think it's possible that everybody's different, right? So if a general manager or a coach or an owner or a public relations person or whoever, if somebody with the team, if it affects them, emotionally or angers them, or they spend too much time, let's say, reading or dwelling on reports that they wish didn't get out or don't like that they got out or don't like how they're phrased, those kind of things, I guess, could affect you negatively. But these guys are paid millions of dollars to make high pressure informed decisions, right? And to do this work. And, if somebody like me negatively affects that by just reporting things, I don't think that person is just not qualified for the job. I think the short answer is, would the Giants have won more games the last, 8 years if I wasn't covering the team? Like, no, I mean, their team is their team. I don't have any effect of what they do on the field. I mean, I guess you could say this, like, do I have an effect, let's say, on like the DeAndre Baker reporting, right? Breaking that news, getting to the bottom of that. And then they end up cutting the guy because, right, everything's out there and they recognize what everything is and they have to do it. Those types of things. Or reporting on, let's say, lawsuits and breaking news on that leads to firings or staff changes, or my in-depth investigative reporting on the Martindale and Kafka and Daboll situations last season and kind of setting the record straight, or at least putting what I view to be the accurate telling of that dynamic out there. Could that have an effect on the decisions they make, and could they react to that by, I don't know, giving promotions to their offensive staff or whatever after one of the worst offensive seasons in franchise history? I mean, I think it would be egotistical to overstate that I'm somehow creating changes with the Giants organization. I mean, these guys are paid a lot of money. They've run this franchise for a long time before I got here. They'll keep running it after I leave. And, I don't think wins and losses hinge on my reporting. I don't know if you think that any differently, but Chronicles, Giant takes. I appreciated that question. That made me reflect. Chronicle says, I'm starting to think the word we expect means it's not 100%. So think about they expect Daniel to be the starter, just like they expect Wink to be back. I see a pattern. Very good, Chronicles. You see it. And Dan Duggan noted that in his recent story in The Athletic, that like it's time to start listening through the we expect things, right? And that's part of why, honestly, to go back to Giants Takes point, like if the organization tells you we expect Wink Martindale to be back, but then they fire those guys and they pull that, and then Martindale resigns and all that, like, you obviously have your eyes open. You say, okay, they said one thing, but they did another, right? And so this was calculated, and look at what happened. And so that's why, like, my reporting is intended to just cut through the noise to get to what's really happening. And so that's why I think Chronicles, you're right to listen to those things and observe those situations and then adjust how you hear them accordingly in the future. Jay Fed says, hopefully the Vikings jump ahead and draft a QB and stay at 6 and draft a wide receiver. Intel says it was a stupid move to not trade Saquon at the deadline. Giant Take says, I'll never be upset with a team that wants to win. I don't care. One player doesn't change your franchise unless it's Patrick Mahomes. Let's see. Jake says Barkley would have fetched a 5th, maybe a 6th at best. The way he left the Giants tells you everything you need to know about him. Tiki was right. I disagree, but that's your prerogative. Jay Stu says, Pat, give us some insight on the running back market. Is Blake Corum a Saquon equivalent? Ooh, Saquon. No, not Saquon. But there are some running backs in the middle rounds here. Corum looks like a really good player. Kid from Oregon, kid from USC, Lloyd. Those are guys to watch. Guys who can help you in the passing game, be dual threat, that type of stuff. Brett, what's going on? Intel says JJ is the best option. Anthony says Dable and Shane are the way forward for the future. Dable needs at least 4, if not 5 years to turn it around. John says, can't believe I'm saying this, but I feel like John Mara is worse than James Dolan. Ooh, hope John's not watching this. Anthony says these receivers at the top are game changers. Molly Mall says trading up is a massive mistake for a rebuilding roster, especially for JJ McCarthy. Let's see. Rich says, hey, Pat, why not bring Adoree back? We need a veteran corner. Didn't have a strong season last year. Again, any of these veterans, like if you can get them at the right number, that could change the scenario. But you're not paying for players, especially the Giants. The Giants just, we're not enamored with that season he had. Let's see. Molly Mall, if Shane is saying nobody talks, why are all these reports about the Giants drafting a QB or moving up, getting out? Is this not coming from them? If it is, it doesn't make sense to speak on it. Yeah, it's interesting, Molly. I think information can come from a lot of places. It can come from agents from other teams. It can come from the team you're talking about, right? If it's the Giants here, the Giants could be putting out smoke screens at times, or other teams can do that as well. So there's a lot of ways information can get out. You could hear from players directly from the horse's mouth. You could hear from schools, right? You could hear there's various ways it gets out. So Joe Shane could feel like people around him, whether it's at schools, whether it's with other teams, have been monitoring how he's been spending his time and, heard chatter. And then they're turning that into information that he's saying is stretching the truth. That could be true. But it does strike to me just as him and the Giants being a little sensitive to the fact that people are talking about what they want to do. Brett says, I would take Kadarius Toney back for a couple dollars even. Oh, I like that. You like when he said you want $1? Hey, maybe Kadarius kind of revives his career for the Chiefs as the kick returner with the new rule. Xavier says, what about Michael Penix Jr.? Are they going to his workout? The Giants like Washington's talent pool a lot, not just Michael Penix Jr. So they'll be represented at Washington for sure. Edwin says we need a number 1 wide receiver. Yes, they do. Dad Hat says Neighbors looks like he might be wide receiver 1. There are teams who think that. The Giants do like Penix. I think a lot of teams like Penix. I know a lot of teams like Penix, but they all have to make their judgments on the injury history. To me, the Giants are a team right now trying to get away from players who have meaningful injury histories. And Xavier, thank you for that super sticker. Sorry I didn't jump down to your question there sooner, but thank you for the support. The $2 there, I really appreciate that. Penix would be like a value pick if the Giants ended up going for a quarterback like him, given the injury history. I think that you have Daniel Jones with the neck. You bring in Drew Lock, but do you also bring in Penix given all the injuries he's been through? Listen, I'm enamored with Penix. Every time I watch him throw, I think this guy's way better than everybody else I'm watching right now, So I love his game. Let's see. Obed says, why are they going after JJ? There are lots of options. He is Jaden Daniels is the best of them all. Interesting. Brett M says, Kyle Rudolph, what quarterback has played 5 years without a number one or anything close? Yeah, no, Kyle, I would expect Kyle to be a future Talkin Ball guest as well, a fellow Notre Damer, great guy. And he makes a good point about Daniel Jones. That's for sure. He makes a good point about Daniel. Let's see. Jake says, have you confirmed the same thing that Ben Albright has reported? Daboll wants a receiver and Shane wants a quarterback. I know that they are in on both positions very strongly. Neighbors said specifically today that he likes dealing with Daboll, that he knows Daboll likes him. It's definitely not like Joe Shane doesn't think Neighbors is good, right? So they're in both markets. Whether there's a split, right, and all that, no, I mean that's speculation based on what you're telling me right now. Listen, the Giants, you do not scout quarterbacks this strongly and diligently at the top of the draft if you're not interested in taking one. Now, that doesn't mean they're definitely going to, but this is the behavior of a team that drafts a quarterback. George says, so Chronicles asked if he was being serious about the Chargers and Joe Shane. George says, I was a security guard at the room they were having the meetings in at the hotel. Jake says, so George, boots on the ground. Chronicle says, oh, nice. Sounds like a great job. Wouldn't mind that. Anything else you heard? Yeah, George is the insider. Getting a phone call right now. Gonna have to take that in a sec. One second. Let's see. Yeah, call him Insider George at this point. Dad Hat says trading up for JJ McCarthy is blasphemy. Country New Yorker says, I think if the Giants really want a quarterback, they need to strike first before other needy quarterback teams. Agree. George says, I think they're really looking to trade up, but the price might be too high. But if you look at if the Bills paid the price and look at Josh Allen now, George is all over it. Jake says, are you surprised Kadarius Toney was not cut? I think he could end up being the solution for kick return in the new rule. But we'll see. George says, if the Giants really want to move up, they will pay the price, but we will see. Brett says, promotions for the offensive staff or hush money? Don't answer that. That's getting a like. Can I like that comment 8 times? Remember, guys, super chats and super stickers if you want your question answered first or addressed immediately. If not, hit thumbs up, hit the like button as we talk. It helps YouTube promote this to everybody. As I reported at the top of the show, the Giants are sending a contingent they're scheduled to send a contingent to Ann Arbor, Michigan on Easter Sunday for a private workout with McCarthy. Shane and Brian Daboll attending multiple pro days, and then they're going to do more work on McCarthy. Brandon Brown and Shea Tierney were at the Michigan Pro Day, and now a closer look. All right, so Will says, is it crazy with Daboll's history of evaluating and developing quarterbacks? Fans should have some level of trust in the quarterback they want to select. Well, Will, that's a good question. I mean, on the one hand, he worked with Josh Allen and Allen blossomed under his watch. On the other hand, is Allen just that special of a talent? And if you look at the rest of Daboll's career, is he a quarterback whisperer or did he end up with Josh Allen? But that's the outlier, right? You don't know. But obviously he got the head coaching job as the offensive coach. So that's why John Mara was saying, like, I pay my GM and coach to make these decisions. So, like, if to your point, Brian Daboll, offensive coach, you're paying him to evaluate and make these calls. Chronicle says, answer the call, Pat. We need more news. Just go on mute. Do you know who is going to Michigan? Who is JJ's agent, etc.? All right. Let's see what else you got here. All right. We're back. We are back. All right. So let's check it out here. What else do we got? Get back into the queue. Molly Mall says, Intel says just do the rebuild. Molly Mall says there's a difference between we expect DJ to be the starter and DJ is our guy, and whenever he's healthy, he's the starter. Sounds pretty definitive to me. They've been saying that for months. It sounds like Daniel Jones is going to play when he's healthy, but it sounds like they don't know how healthy he's going to be. They're hedging against whether he will be, and they brought in Drew Lock with a chance to get a lot of reps and compete to be the guy to step in, and also now looking to draft a quarterback in the future. Intel says they should have done a rebuild 2 years ago. They started one, but it hasn't gone well. That's the one thing, it's only fair. The drafting hasn't been great. And the roster build, even though they were digging themselves out of a hole from Dave Gettleman's time, the roster build has not happened the way that it needed to through the first 2 years. There's been some positives, but there's been a lot of misses as well. And a lot of, we're still waiting on this player. Evan Neal, is he a complete bust at number 7? Wide receiver, still need a number 1. Offensive line, one of the worst in franchise history last year, right? So, yeah, you can't. All right, Kyle says, been a minute. Last time I was here, I mentioned the Giants made their bed with Daniel Jones and would have to give up the idea of signing Barkley. Draft best player, don't care if it's quarterback, offensive tackle, and wide receiver. Yes, Kyle, you're on it. Kyle, a good example of one of the many Giants fans who, in the community that we're building here, you guys know what you're talking about. Mustang JMS says, I don't think there's any point of smoke screening for a quarterback unless they want Marvin Harrison. Stewart says, how would you feel about Neighbors or Dunze at 6, then Penix later on? Rumors about Penix to the Giants. I wouldn't hate that, except I think Penix's injury history is concerning. But, there are rumors that several NFL teams are looking at that scenario, if we don't take the quarterback high, do we take Penix, the flyer on Penix, a little bit later because the value is different because of the injury history? But if he stays healthy, we're getting like a top 5 player and we're getting the receiver up high. So you're going to see somebody flip into that scenario in the NFL who's in the quarterback market. I don't know if it's going to be the Giants. Dad Hat says, I'm praying, and I don't pray, that this J.J. McCarthy is a smokescreen. Wally Mall would rather Penix. Kyle says, is there a chance we went defense in round 1? Oh, if there was a chance we went defense in round 1, who would you take? The edge rusher from Bama, I guess. But let's see. There's a kid, what's his name? There's a kid from Penn State that I heard that they've spent a lot of time with, Adisa Isaac. I know the Giants have gotten around him a little bit. So Brooklyn kid, edge rusher from Penn State, could he be like a second rounder? So he's not a first rounder, most likely, but that's like to give you an idea of where they've been spending their time, right? And given what the draft crop looks like at different positions. Jake says, Pat, what is Joe Shane doing calling you at 11 p.m.? Jake, you're like one of my colleagues, the reporters who are always kind of trying to snoop around and see who you talk to, right? I love Brett saying, answer your phone. Maybe it's Isaiah Simmons. You guys were pushing me to get it done. Chronicles, no doubt. Love it. Molly Mall says Mara made that statement because he was tired of fans saying he's forcing Shane and Dable to keep Jones and tell everyone they actually think he's a good quarterback. Oh, yeah. Trying to remember who exactly kept asking me this. I promised that I would get the answer. But I asked John Mara about the perception that he meddled with the Daniel Jones contract heavily. And he said, Pat, that contract would have gotten done with or without me. So that's what John Mara said. He said that the contract would have gotten done with or without him. So that's obviously, is he going to say, oh, yeah, I meddled, they didn't want to sign him? I mean, he's not going to say that. But I know that's something the fans keep talking and asking about, especially on here. So I just asked him flat out. And he actually said that the evidence that he doesn't meddle is also in the fact that he let Saquon go to the Eagles because he didn't want to lose Saquon, number one, and he definitely didn't want to lose him in division. But he said he's trusting Joe Schoen and Brian Dable. Chronicle said if it was Joe Schoen that he thinks it was Joe Schoen on the phone with me saying, what the hell did you just report and how do you know it? Let's see. Chronicle says, man, this is the world of a sports reporter. This is cool to see. Yeah, live in action, right? Maybe one day we'll get to the Adam Schefter level of 8 cell phones, live TV, breaking out of what you're talking about on live TV to take the calls, right? We're here doing it on Talkin Ball. Bill Hardnett says, holy crap, the Knicks won by 44. That's crazy. Let's see. Yeah, Brett saying it's not an NFL related call. Yeah. I will say that was an NFL person. That was a source calling me. Listen, I reported about JJ and the Giants tonight, right? There's phone calls coming in. All right. Obed says, rank the quarterback the Giants like in the draft, in your opinion. Obed, I would just say it feels right now like JJ is the guy at the top as far as who they could get to realistically. And also they Drake May is a guy who profiles as the type of player that he's a guy who profiles as the type of quarterback that the Giants would like. But it will be interesting to see if that is the kind of player they're looking into. Is he a guy that they would be willing to trade up for or take at 6, right? Crunch Bun says, just found out about a past misdemeanor charge for neighbors illegally carrying a weapon. Has this negatively affected his draft stock? Not that I have heard. Bill Hartnett, Plaxico reference. Will Birch says, after asking my question, I did some quick research and the response certainly holds some validity. Dable has not necessarily been directly involved in developing any notable QBs other than Allen. Right. Thanks for checking me, though. Brett says, why shouldn't I want a lineman around 2 after our new number 1? Of course. Yeah, I mean, listen, they need to draft offensive linemen too. That's what I was saying about the draft. The Giants just have so much they have so many needs, you can make an argument for anything. I mean, they're not the only team like that either. Kyle Gata says they're looking at pass rushers too. I like it. Molly Mall says there's no way DJ is the starter if they draft a quarterback 6 or higher. It never works out for the supposed starter in front of a first-round rookie. I agree. Like that eventually you're drafting a guy there, he's going to eventually play, especially because the team's not going to be good. What are the Giants going to do about adding a big interior guy next to Dex? I think they got a draft there. They need to replenish. Pat, what's your thought on the receiver from South Carolina, Xavier? I think it's Leggett. Big body, can make plays down the field, can go up and get the ball, contested catches, right? Love that about him. I think he's a player that if you get at the right value, very intriguing prospect. Dan says, still don't have a warm, fuzzy feeling about the currently constructed offensive line. They should have retained Bredesen, in my opinion. They have to address guard in the early rounds of the draft. Yeah, and as I've reported before, that kid from Illinois, Isaiah Adams, was a guy they spent a lot of time with at the Senior Bowl. I think him and other guys who fit his profile are players to watch. Jay Stewart official says, I think if they go quarterback in round 1, Daniel Jones never plays because of the injury guarantee cap hit in 25, a la Russell Wilson. Jake says, how is the comp pick situation looking like? I think someone else I was talking to was checking it for me the other day and said that it was canceled out and no comp picks for next year as of this moment based on projections, but of course, just projections. So that turns out that's where it stands. But this has been another great Talkin Ball live. You guys make these great. Thank you for all the super chats and super stickers to all the loyal followers and listeners. And even if it was just participating, hitting the like button, really appreciate that. Of course, the headline of this coming out of the owners' meetings, coming out of talking to Joe Shane, John Mara, Brian Daboll, is their strong homework and interest in the quarterback position at the top of the draft. Specifically, the news we broke tonight here on the Talkin Ball Live podcast with Pat Leonard, a source saying the Giants are scheduled to send a contingent to Ann Arbor, Michigan on Easter Sunday for a private workout with J.J. McCarthy. Shane and Daboll going to multiple pro days. You have Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Brandon Brown, and Shea Tierney were at McCarthy's pro day. Now comes a closer look for the Giants. You guys have been the best. Let's see. Let's close it out with a few of your last questions here. Kyle says, Pat, do you believe in this staff? Feels like the most competent bunch we've had in years. True believe that last year was a product of just how deep in the hole we have been. What's your thoughts? I mean, I think, Kyle, I think the Giants have overturned most of the staff. I mean, I think it was a disaster last year. I think that their best coach last year on the best side of the ball was their defense, and now they've had to turn that over. So that doesn't encourage me. I know it'll be a look different defense, but they were blitzing heavy, not only because Martindale runs that type of scheme, but also because they weren't getting pass rushes otherwise. Kyle, I do not personally have confidence. I think the talent on the roster is an issue too. It's not just the staff. Kyle, I think it's like right now, you have one season, you have a half a season basically in the first year, including, it was basically like the first 6 or 7 games of that season, plus the Colts game and the Vikings playoff game of looking at Daboll and looking at the staff and saying, finally, right, we have something. But then you look at the close nature of their wins in that season, the fortunate victories they had in close wins. You look at some of the really bad game management late that season, how the offense really slid, how the game management and game situation decisions from Daboll on down didn't work out, especially in that Eagles playoff blowout in Philly. And then you look at how some of those issues carried right over into year 2 and reared their heads again, along with the sideline antics and those problems. Like, I just think you could say year 1's the anomaly, or you could say year 2's the anomaly. And you could believe either one. There's evidence for both. But to me, there's just so many red flags. And Kyle, I'll be honest, I know too much about how bad it got last year. And I reported it all, right? I mean, I reported it. But it's just so much went so poorly last year that is so concerning for the future. It's not just about last year being bad, right? That's how I feel. So, but listen, they're working to get it right. But it's going to be tough. I mean, listen, I have nothing to do with the Vegas over/under win totals. Vegas over/under win total for the Giants at the moment is 6.5. It's 6.5, right? They went 6-11 last year. That's Vegas telling you that they're probably going to go 6-11 again, or maybe win an extra game with the help of the schedule, right? That's what they're telling you. Let's see. Kyle says, tough to hear the truth, but that's what we're here for. That's right. Well, that's my opinion too, my informed opinion. Brett says, I want McCaffrey, the wide receiver, faster than his brother by a point. Chronicle says, Pat, it's been real. How were your travels? Any lost luggage? Don't fly JetBlue. They're the worst. My travels were great. Thank you. I will admit to being a little bit tired, but it's a good tired. I'm fortunate, man. I just spent, a week in Florida, half of the time vacation, watching baseball, spending time with the Yankees, spending time with family, and then the other half of it on the company dime, working with NFL owners, executives, coaches, GMs, personnel. Like I'm very fortunate, and that's why I really always love kind of bringing the information and the news directly to you guys, because I know I'm fortunate to be close to it, and then I want you guys to be close to it as well. Jake says, thank you. Thank you, Jake. A2Z says, late night talk, missed most of it. A2Z don't worry. You can rewatch the entire thing. It'll be up here on the YouTube page. Jake says, last one, were you surprised Darnay was back? Wasn't expecting that. Yeah, it surprised me too. Darnay, Isaiah Hodgins, like two guys that I did not envision were coming back, but are back. Brett says, thanks, Pat. I was late. I was late with guitar. Lightning Hopkins once was a gambler. Check it out. All right. George says, thank you, Pat. George, thanks for checking in with the Chargers Giants trade discussion that you said you overheard at the NFL owners meetings. Very interesting. If you missed it, go back and watch. Go back in the queue. You can see George's insight earlier. Guys, remember, thanks so much. We are sponsored here by Bet Online. Also by Estate 98 Coffee. It's an Esencia de Cafe from El Salvador. Dates back to 1798. It takes 3 seconds to make. I drink it all the time when I'm doing the Talkin Ball podcast. No drink for me tonight other than some coffee to stay awake and some water to get through it, to hydrate. We're going to get some sleep, and then we're going to get right back on the NFL draft news train and on this and on the Giants beat, because as you guys know, it's nonstop, right? It doesn't stop. And Bill closes us out. Jake says, Insider George going to start hosting his own lives. That's right. And Bill closes us out with a super sticker, says, thanks for the late night videos. SoCal present. Bill checking in from SoCal. Appreciate you. Thank you so much for that to close us out. And Kyle says, this is how you engage with fans. Love it, Pat. Salute. Kyle, thanks for coming back. We're going to try to get back on the schedule. Let's see. Next week, what do we have next week? Next week, I think, is more of a normal week. We're coming off of Easter. So we will be raring to go back on the train with a Monday 9 p.m. and Thursday 9 p.m. Live chats, Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard live. So I'll see you guys next Monday on the Talkin Ball Live with Pat Leonard podcast. But remember, you can follow me on P Leonard NYDN on X. I am PL on NFL on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and Threads. And I'm on the New York Daily News website and also on the Believe Network, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. More good episodes coming. More good guests coming. We had Phil Simms on recently. Go check that episode out if you missed it. Thanks again, fellas. Thanks again, everybody, ladies, gentlemen, Giants diehards, NFL fans. Talk to you next time.